The camera flash popped, and Anthony's heart stuttered, not from the glare, but from the way Ethan's hand lingered on his waist, warm and deliberate, as they posed for the crowd. They were selling a story, a lie spun from the pages of a novel they'd both starred in promoting, but the heat in Ethan's brown eyes felt too real, too dangerous. By the time the New York skyline faded into twilight behind them, Anthony wasn't sure if he was acting anymore. It had started 3 months ago, in a sleek Manhattan office where their literary agent, Clara, pitched the idea with the enthusiasm of a carnival barker. "You two are perfect," she'd said, her manicured nails tapping the manuscript of Hearts in Shadow, a queer romance novel tipped to be the next bestseller. "Anthony, you're the brooding writer with a face made for book covers. Ethan, you're the charming actor who can sell anything. Pretend to be lovers, stir up buzz, and this book will fly off shelves." Anthony had laughed, thinking it was a joke. Ethan, ever the professional, had only grinned, his eyes glinting with mischief. "Why not?" he'd said, and Anthony, against his better judgment, agreed. The plan was simple: public appearances, staged photos, flirty interviews, all to fuel the book's hype. Anthony, 25, had written Hearts in Shadow as a cathartic escape from his own guarded heart, pouring his unspoken desires into the fictional love story of two men defying a judgmental world. Ethan, 26, was a rising star in off-Broadway theater, known for his charisma and ability to slip into any role. They were strangers then, bound only by a contract and a shared goal. But as weeks passed, the lines of their performance blurred. A staged handhold at a book signing lingered too long. A scripted kiss for a magazine shoot left Anthony breathless, his lips tingling hours later. Ethan's playful teasing off-camera felt less like acting and more like a dare. Tonight, at the book's launch party on a rooftop in Chelsea, the stakes felt higher. The crowd, publishers, influencers, and fans, watched them like hawks, phones raised to capture every glance. Anthony adjusted his blazer, trying to focus on the script, smile, lean in, whisper something sweet. But Ethan's breath was warm against his ear, and the whispered, "You look good tonight," wasn't in the script. Anthony's pulse raced. He turned, their faces inches apart, and for a moment, the world shrank to just them. The city's hum, the camera clicks, all fading into a distant buzz. "Careful," Anthony murmured, his voice low, meant only for Ethan. "You're too good at this." Ethan's lips curved into a half-smile, his fingers brushing Anthony's arm. "Am I? Or are you just easy to convince?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Anthony wanted to laugh it off, to keep the charade intact, but his chest tightened with a truth he wasn't ready to face. This was supposed to be a game, a publicity stunt. So why did Ethan's touch feel like it was rewriting his story? As the party swirled around them, Clara swooped in, her red lipstick a slash of confidence. "You two are magic," she said, clapping her hands. "The internet's already losing it over your chemistry. Keep it up, and we'll have a bestseller by morning." She handed them flutes of champagne, oblivious to the tension crackling between them. Anthony took a sip, the bubbles sharp on his tongue, and stole a glance at Ethan, who was charming a group of reporters with ease. But when their eyes met across the crowd, Ethan's smile softened, and Anthony felt a pull he couldn't ignore. Later, as guests mingled and the city lights twinkled below, Anthony found himself alone at the rooftop's edge, staring at the manuscript in his hands. Hearts in Shadow was his truth laid bare, a story of two men finding love against all odds. Writing it had been his way of grappling with his own identity, his fear of being seen. Now, playing the part of a lover with Ethan, he wondered if he'd written his own heart into a trap. Ethan appeared beside him, leaning against the railing, his shoulder brushing Anthony's. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer than the party's din. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the world." Anthony forced a smile, clutching the manuscript tighter. "Just thinking about the story. It's personal, you know? And this." He gestured vaguely at the crowd, the cameras, their act. "It's messing with my head." Ethan studied him, his gaze steady. "What's messing with you? The act or me?" The question hit like a punch. Anthony opened his mouth to deflect, to keep the walls up, but Ethan's hand grazed his, and the words died in his throat. For the first time, Anthony saw something unguarded in Ethan's eyes, vulnerability, not performance. The air between them crackled, and Anthony knew this wasn't just a game anymore. The next morning, Anthony woke to a flood of notifications. His phone buzzed relentlessly, tweets, Instagram tags, articles dissecting every moment of last night's rooftop chemistry. Anthony and Ethan, the real-life romance behind Hearts in Shadow, one headline screamed. His stomach churned. The world was buying their act, but the truth was messier, more dangerous. He tossed his phone onto the bed, trying to shake the memory of Ethan's hand on his, the way his own heart had betrayed him with every beat. They had a full day ahead, interviews, a bookstore signing, a podcast recording. Anthony met Ethan at a trendy Soho cafe, where the scent of espresso mingled with the buzz of early morning patrons. Ethan was already there, sprawled in a corner booth, his chestnut hair catching the light. He looked effortlessly perfect in a fitted denim jacket, his smile easy but laced with something deeper when he saw Anthony. "Rough night?" Ethan asked, sliding a coffee across the table. His tone was light, but his eyes searched Anthony's face. Anthony shrugged, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. "Just the internet doing what it does, turning our lives into a soap opera." Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. "Let them talk. We're giving them a story they can't resist. Isn't that the point?" The point. Anthony wanted to believe it was still about the book, about sales and success. But every time Ethan looked at him like that, warm, teasing, intense, he felt the ground shift beneath him. "Yeah," he said, forcing a smile. The point. Their first interview was with a popular queer lifestyle magazine, the kind that thrived on heartthrob stories. The interviewer, a sharp-eyed woman named Lila, didn't waste time. "So, you too," she said, leaning in with a knowing grin. The chemistry at the launch was electric. "Is there something more going on here? Or is this all for the book?" Anthony froze, his mind scrambling for the scripted answer. Ethan, ever the actor, jumped in smoothly. "We're just two guys selling a love story," he said, his hand brushing Anthony's knee under the table. "But I'll admit, Anthony makes it easy to get lost in the role." He flashed a grin, and the room laughed, but Anthony's skin burned where Ethan's hand had been. The day blurred into a whirlwind of smiles, poses, and half-truths. At the bookstore signing, fans gushed over their romance, asking for selfies and autographs. Anthony signed copies of Hearts in Shadow, his signature shaky as Ethan's arm draped casually around his shoulders. Each touch, each shared glance, felt like a step closer to a line they couldn't uncross. By the time they reached the podcast studio, Anthony was unraveling, his carefully guarded walls crumbling under the weight of Ethan's presence. The podcast, Love in the Margins, was known for its raw, emotional interviews. The host, Marcus, a soft-spoken man with a knack for cutting through facades, didn't hold back. "Anthony, your novel feels so real," he said, leaning into the mic. "It's like you've lived every moment of that love story. How much of it is you?" Anthony's throat tightened. He'd written Hearts in Shadow in a haze of loneliness, pouring his unspoken feelings for men he'd never dared approach into every page. Now, with Ethan sitting beside him, his knee brushing Anthony's under the table, the question felt like a spotlight on his soul. "It's inspired by real emotions," he said carefully. "But it's fiction. I'm not the characters." Ethan's gaze flickered to him, and for a moment, Anthony thought he saw disappointment. "Fiction or not," Ethan said, his voice soft but firm, "it's a story that matters. It's why we're doing this, right? To show people love like this exists." The words hit Anthony hard. He nodded, unable to speak, as Marcus moved on to lighter questions. But Ethan's words lingered, echoing in Anthony's mind as they left the studio and stepped into the cool evening air. The city pulsed around them, alive with possibility, and Anthony felt the weight of everything unsaid. They walked in silence to a quiet bar in the East Village, a place Ethan suggested to decompress. The dim lighting and soft jazz made it feel like a world apart from the day's chaos. They slid into a booth, drinks in hand, and for the first time, there were no cameras, no scripts, just them. "You were quiet today," Ethan said, swirling his whiskey. "Everything okay?" Anthony stared into his beer, the amber liquid reflecting the bar's warm glow. "This whole thing, it's getting to me. The act, the attention, the way people look at us like we're..." He stopped, unsure how to finish. "Like we're in love." Ethan finished, his voice gentle but pointed. Anthony's heart thudded. He wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, but the truth was clawing its way out. "It's not just that," he said finally. "It's you. You're making this too real, Ethan, and I don't know how to handle it." Ethan's expression softened, and he reached across the table, his fingers brushing Anthony's. "Maybe it's not supposed to be handled," he said. "Maybe we're supposed to feel it." The words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. Anthony's breath caught, and for a moment, he let himself imagine what it would be like to stop pretending, to let the lines blur completely. But fear, sharp and familiar, clawed at him. He pulled his hand back, breaking the moment. "We should stick to the script," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's eyes darkened, but he nodded. "If that's what you want," he said, and the distance between them felt wider than ever. The next week was a blur of promotional events, each one pushing Anthony closer to the edge. Their romance was a wildfire online, with fan edits of their rooftop moment racking up millions of views. Clara was thrilled, calling it a marketing miracle, but Anthony felt like he was drowning. Every smile, every touch, every staged moment with Ethan was a reminder of the truth he was too afraid to face. They were in Chicago now, for a literary festival. The city's crisp autumn air did little to cool the heat in Anthony's chest whenever Ethan was near. At a panel discussion, they sat side by side, answering questions about hearts and shadow. The moderator, a cheerful woman named Priya, leaned forward. "Anthony, your novel tackles love in a world that doesn't always accept it. How do you balance hope and struggle in your writing?" Anthony hesitated, his mind flashing to his own life, his conservative hometown, the years spent hiding who he was. "It's about truth," he said finally. "Love doesn't erase the struggle, but it gives you a reason to keep going. That's what I wanted to capture." Ethan's hand rested on the arm of his chair, close enough to feel the warmth. "Anthony's story does more than that," Ethan said, his voice earnest. "It makes you feel seen. It's why I signed on for this, because it's real." The audience applauded, but Anthony's chest tightened. Ethan's words weren't just for the crowd. They were for him. After the panel, they lingered backstage, the hum of the festival fading as the crew packed up. Ethan turned to him, his expression unreadable. "You meant that, didn't you? About love being worth the struggle?" Anthony nodded, his throat dry. "Yeah, but it's easier to write it than to live it." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. "Then why are you fighting this so hard?" The question was a blade, cutting through Anthony's defenses. He wanted to answer, to spill everything. His fear, his longing, the way Ethan's presence unraveled him. But before he could speak, Clara burst in, her phone buzzing with updates. "You two are trending again," she said, oblivious to the tension. "We've got a photo shoot tomorrow. Intimate, romantic vibes. Think cozy bookstore, soft lighting. You're gonna kill it." Anthony forced a smile, but his mind was elsewhere. That night, unable to sleep, he sat on his hotel balcony, the Chicago skyline glittering below. He thought of hearts in shadow, of the characters he'd created who fought for their love despite everything. He'd written them to be brave, but he felt like a coward. The photo shoot the next day was torture. The bookstore, a quaint indie shop with shelves of worn paperbacks, was lit with warm, golden light. The photographer, a wiry man named Javier, directed them with enthusiasm. Anthony, lean against the shelf. Ethan, stand behind him, hands on his shoulders. Look at each other like you're the only ones in the room. Ethan's hands were warm, steady, and Anthony's breath hitched as their eyes met. The camera clicked, but all Anthony could see was Ethan, his soft smile, the way his eyes seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken words. "You're shaking," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm fine," Anthony lied, but his voice cracked. He wasn't fine. He was falling, and he didn't know how to stop. After the shoot, they wandered the city, the tension between them palpable. They ended up at a quiet park along Lake Michigan, the water shimmering under the afternoon sun. Ethan sat on a bench, patting the space beside him. Anthony hesitated, then sat, their knees brushing. "Why do you keep pulling away?" Ethan asked, his voice gentle but firm. "I know this started as a stunt, but it's more than that now. I feel it. You feel it." Anthony's heart pounded. He wanted to deny it, to retreat to the safety of the script, but Ethan's honesty disarmed him. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. It's too much." What if it's not real? What if it's just the act? Ethan's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. It's real for me, he said, his voice steady. I've been acting my whole life, Anthony. I know the difference between a role and the truth. This is the truth. Anthony's breath caught, and for a moment, he let himself believe it. He leaned closer, their foreheads almost touching, the world narrowing to just them. But then his phone buzzed, a text from Clara with another schedule, another reminder of their charade. He pulled back, the moment shattered. We can't, he said, standing abruptly. Not like this. Not when it's all for show. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. As Anthony walked away, the ache in his chest grew, and he wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Back in New York, the promotion machine roared on. Hearts and Shadow was climbing bestseller lists, and their romance was the talk of every literary circle. But Anthony felt like he was living a lie, not just to the world, but to himself. Ethan's confession by Lake Michigan haunted him, replaying in his mind like a song he couldn't shake. He wanted to believe it was real, but doubt clung to him like damp air. Their next event was a live-streamed Q&A at a downtown theater, packed with fans and reporters. The stage lights were blinding, and Anthony's nerves were raw as he sat beside Ethan, their chairs close enough that their shoulders brushed. The host, a charismatic man named Leo, grinned at the crowd. Let's get to the juicy stuff, he said. You two have the internet in a frenzy. How much of this chemistry is real? The crowd cheered, and Anthony's stomach dropped. Ethan, as always, took the lead. We're professionals, he said with a wink. But I won't lie, working with Anthony feels like something special. His hand rested on Anthony's arm, a gesture that looked casual but felt like fire. Anthony managed to smile, but his mind was elsewhere. After the Q&A, they were mobbed by fans, and in the chaos, Ethan's hand found his, guiding him through the crowd. The touch was grounding, but it also reignited the ache in Anthony's chest. They escaped to a quiet alley behind the theater, the city's pulse a distant hum. You didn't answer Leo's question, Ethan said, leaning against the brick wall. What's real for you, Anthony? Anthony's throat tightened. He wanted to say everything, to admit that Ethan's touch, his voice, his presence had become his anchor. But fear stopped him. I don't know, he said, his voice hoarse. I wanted to be real, but I'm terrified it's not. What if we're just caught up in the hype? Ethan stepped closer, his eyes searching Anthony's. I'm not caught up in anything, he said. I've known who I am for a long time, Anthony, and I know what I feel when I'm with you. The words were a lifeline, but Anthony was too scared to grab it. He turned away, his hands shaking. I need time, he said. I need to figure this out. Ethan nodded, his expression a mix of hurt and understanding. Take all the time you need, he said. But don't hide from this forever. The next few days were a blur of events, but Anthony couldn't shake Ethan's words. At a charity gala, they posed for photos, their smiles polished, but their eyes guarded. Clara, ever the orchestrator, pulled them aside. You're doing great, but we need more heat, she said. The fans want passion. Give them a moment, something big. Anthony's stomach twisted. He hated how their connection was being commodified, but he nodded, knowing it was part of the deal. That night, as they danced for the cameras, Ethan's arms around him, Anthony felt the world tilt. The music was slow, the crowd a blur, and Ethan's breath was warm against his cheek. Stop thinking, Ethan whispered. Just feel. For a moment, Anthony did. He let himself lean into Ethan, let the warmth of his embrace drown out the noise. The cameras loved it, but Anthony barely noticed. All he could feel was Ethan, his strength, his steadiness, the way he made Anthony want to be brave. But bravery was fleeting. Later, at their hotel, Anthony found himself alone in his room, staring at the manuscript of Hearts and Shadow. He'd written about love that defied fear, but he was letting fear win. He thought of his past, of the small town where he'd hidden his truth, of the years spent believing he didn't deserve this kind of happiness. Ethan was offering him a chance, but could he take it? A knock at the door startled him. Ethan stood there, his jacket off, his expression raw. I can't keep pretending, he said. Not with you. I need to know where we stand, Anthony. No cameras, no script. Just us. Anthony's heart raced. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Ethan waited, his eyes pleading, but when Anthony stayed silent, he turned to leave. Wait, Anthony said, his voice breaking. I'm scared, Ethan, but I don't want to lose this. Ethan turned back, hope flickering in his eyes. Then don't, he said. Let's figure it out together. The air between them was electric, charged with everything they hadn't said. Anthony stood frozen, Ethan's words echoing in his mind. Let's figure it out together. For the first time, he felt the weight of his own fear and the possibility of something greater on the other side. He stepped forward, closing the distance, and before he could overthink it, he kissed Ethan. It wasn't like the scripted kisses for the cameras. This was raw, urgent, real. Ethan's hands found Anthony's face, pulling him closer, and the world fell away. When they finally parted, breathless, Ethan's smile was soft, unguarded. That's a start, he said, his voice low. Anthony laughed, a shaky sound that broke the tension. I don't know what I'm doing, he admitted. But I want this. I want us. Ethan's eyes softened. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. The next few weeks were a whirlwind, not just of promotion, but of something new blooming between them. They still played their parts for the cameras, flirty glances, staged touches. But now, off camera, there were stolen moments, quiet dinners in Ethan's apartment, late-night walks through Central Park, conversations that stretched into dawn. Anthony felt like he was waking up, like the world was brighter with Ethan in it. But the pressure of their public facade was relentless. At a book tour stop in San Francisco, a reporter cornered them, her questions sharp. Anthony, you've been private about your personal life. Is this romance with Ethan you're coming out? The question caught him off guard, and he fumbled, his silence louder than any answer. Ethan stepped in, his voice calm. We're here to talk about the book, he said. Our personal lives are just that, personal. But the reporter's smirk lingered, and Anthony felt exposed, like his truth was being dissected for clicks. That night, in their hotel, Anthony paced. I froze out there, he said, running a hand through his hair. I should have said something, anything, but I didn't know how. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, watching him. You don't owe anyone your story, he said. Not until you're ready. But I want to be ready, Anthony said, his voice breaking. I wrote a whole book about being brave, and I'm still hiding. Ethan stood, pulling him into a hug. You're not hiding, he said. You're figuring it out. And I'm here, okay? We're doing this together. The words steadied him, but doubt lingered. The world was watching, and their romance was no longer just a stunt. It was a mirror reflecting Anthony's own struggle. He wanted to be the man in his novel, the one who chose love over fear, but every step forward felt like a leap into the unknown. Their final event before a much-needed break was a literary conference in Miami. The humid air clung to them as they posed for photos on a sunlit terrace, the ocean sparkling in the distance. Anthony felt Ethan's hand on his back, a quiet reassurance, and for the first time, he didn't pull away. The cameras caught it, and the internet exploded, but Anthony didn't care. He was starting to believe this could be real. That night, they walked along the beach, the waves lapping at their feet. Ethan stopped, turning to face him. I'm falling for you, Anthony, he said, his voice steady. Not the act, not the story. You. Anthony's heart soared, but fear tugged at him. What if I mess this up, he asked. What if I'm not enough? Ethan took his hand, his grip firm. You're enough, he said. You've always been enough. The words broke something open in Anthony, and he kissed Ethan under the stars, the sound of the ocean drowning out his doubts. For the first time, he felt like he could be the man he'd written about, the one who chose love, no matter the cost. The book tour ended, but Anthony and Ethan's story was just beginning. Back in New York, they faced a new challenge, defining what they were without the cameras, the scripts, the expectations. Hearts and Shadow was a bestseller, its success a testament to their chemistry, but Anthony knew the real test was living the truth they'd started to build. They moved slowly, carving out a space for themselves away from the spotlight. Ethan's apartment became their sanctuary, a place where Anthony could let his guard down. They cooked together, laughed over bad reality TV, and talked about everything, their fears, their dreams, the lives they wanted to build. Anthony was still scared, but with Ethan beside him, the fear felt smaller, manageable. One evening, as snow dusted the city, Clara called them to her office. You did it, she said, beaming. The book's a hit, and your romance is the story of the year. But people are asking questions. They want to know what's next for you too. Anthony glanced at Ethan, his heart steady. We're done pretending, he said, his voice firm. What we have is real, and we're figuring it out on our terms. Clara's eyes widened, but she nodded. Fair enough. Just keep me posted. The fans will want to know. The fans. The world. Anthony knew their story would never be fully private, but he was ready to face it. He'd spent years hiding, afraid of who he was. But Ethan had shown him what it meant to be seen, to be loved. He wasn't the character in his novel, but he was learning to be just as brave. Months later, at a quiet bookstore reading, Anthony stood before a small crowd, Ethan at his side. He'd written a new essay, a companion piece to Hearts in Shadow, about love, fear, and the courage to be yourself. As he read, his voice steady, he felt Ethan's hand in his, a quiet anchor. The crowd listened, rapt, and when he finished, they applauded, not just for the words, but for the truth behind them. Afterward, a young man approached, his eyes nervous but hopeful. Your book had helped me, he said. I came out to my family because of it. Thank you. Anthony's throat tightened, and he squeezed Ethan's hand. Thank you, he said. That means everything. As they left the bookstore, snow falling softly around them, Ethan pulled Anthony close. You did that, he said. You wrote something that changed someone's life. We did that, Anthony corrected, smiling. Together, they walked into the night, hand in hand, the city alive around them. The lines between fiction and desire had blurred long ago, but what remained was real, messy, beautiful, and worth every risk. Anthony had written a love story, but with Ethan, he was living one. And that, he knew, was the truest ending of all.